Karla, thank you so much for joining me on Red, White, and Bloomington. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here.
All right. So you are currently running for the State Senate District in Minnesota for Bloomington Senate District 50. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself to the residents of our district?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Alex. This is so meaningful, and I really appreciate that you've given us all a platform to share and to connect with our community, because I think we all really feel that need to connect with each other and listen to each other. So in terms of who I am, my name is Karla Hult, and I'm honored to be here. I am a lifelong Minnesotan. So I grew up not in Bloomington or Edina, but I grew up in Minnesota. I attended a church in St. Paul's East Side, which is a melting pot of so many different people and generations. And it was there that my dad served as the refugee resettlement director of our East Side church. And that's meaningful because my best friends growing up were Hmong refugees. And it really instilled in me some of the values that I have carried with me throughout my life. And I will say specifically over the last few months, and we've all looked at these last few months as so defining for us, but I often have thought about how contradictory it is and how completely hypocritical it is that people are going after others on the basis of what they consider a claim to American status. But never the mind, that is really a lot of what led me to some of my educational degrees. I went to St. Olaf College, where I focused on English and political science. I went to Columbia University, where I focused on economic and political development and a master's of international affairs. And that's always been my passion. It led me to ALIGHT, which is the former American Refugee Committee. I've been a longtime advocate and consultant there. And then also People Serving People. And that's the state's largest shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And I think, again, it's a question of where in the timeline do you fall in terms of when you came to the United States, and recognizing that unless you are Indigenous or Native American, that you too at some point were a new immigrant, a new neighbor in our community, and so that needs to be taken into consideration for our outreach and for how we show up in our community. And I've been a longtime advocate too in terms of I'm a daughter of an incredible person who I mentioned. My dad was the refugee resettlement director at our East Side church, and he was my person, honestly. And I lost him to Alzheimer's disease. And that journey is so hard for any family that goes through it. And our family had relatively easy access to resources, but still we struggled. And so after that, I did start my own mission called So Many Goodbyes to uplift families that are on that journey today, and at the same time educate further about what that healthcare crisis looks like, especially in this age of inability to access affordable health care. And that really plagues us throughout our community, as we know, with some parts of our community experiencing that at a much higher level. So that has been part of my advocacy. But I'll just note, as an advocate as well, I'm a mom. And anytime you become a parent, I think anytime we think about our future generations, we are just so convinced and committed to, upholding our planet, upholding our opportunities for our kids. And that goes to gun reform and what more we can do there, what we can do in terms of a clean energy future, and certainly what we can do in terms of fully funding our schools, because we know that there is a significant difference between schools that have the resources, teachers and staff who feel like they are fully supported, and those schools that do not. The through line from all of this, however, is being a journalist, and that has been my profession. And the reason I bring that up, kind of to wrap up, is that might be how some folks identify me. It is certainly my skill set in terms of my career. I'm a trained communicator, and I always say I love to listen, and that is really why I am here today. I started talking to DFL leaders years ago and always recognized that I wanted to serve the community when the time was right. And this time right now, when we saw how much was at stake in the last few months, I think a lot of us felt called to jump into mutual aid actions, jump into any kind of service that we could. And for me, I knew I needed to bring my communication skills to the party that I feel so strongly about and the values that I want to uphold and help fight for. So that's the bit of the background. That could have been shorter, but there you go.
That's great. And we'll definitely touch base on some more of that.
Yeah.
So along that journey, give me a little bit of information about why you think State Senate is the right move for you.
So State Senate is incredibly critical, right? Just look at the number, the sheer number and the representation, and it is that direct relationship to our community. Minnesota is responsible for delivering the services on which so many of us count day in and day out. I will note too that look at the U.S. Congress right now, and they're in a bit of a state of paralysis. We hope that that changes with the midterms, but this is where I truly feel we can make the most difference. And I think Minnesotans have proven that again in the last few months.
Sure.
We as a state are commanding, and we can stand up, and we have to stand up with a very definite and discerning stand and language and messaging and action. All of it comes together. So that's why I think the state senate is a really important place to serve.
Awesome, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about that position. Tell me how you define that role. What is a state senator to you?
Yeah, I think you also had hinted at that. Is it legislative? Is it coalition building? Is it, talking to your community? And I would say all of the above.
Okay.
It is all of the above. It is making sure that we are protecting the values and the policies that serve us the best. It is building the coalition to help us make sure that those policies get the traction that they need, get literally the votes that they need. And it is listening to our community. Our community, we're incredibly gifted in this community. We have so many diverse perspectives, lived experiences, and incredible skill sets. And I have to tell you that as I've been talking to the delegates, I am so inspired by all of our community members who, again, are so mobilized in this moment, but also bring these unique skill sets as well. And because my strength and my skill set, if you will, is listening and wanting to harness all that power and bring it into a really powerful and important message, I am incredibly grateful by the bounty that we have in this district. So that's what I look at the state senator as being. We're a representative democracy, and you are our community's representative.
Perfect. So you kind of touched base on the next question a little bit about your background and your community work that you've done. But tell me a little bit about what kind of informs your decision to have done that? How do you think you represent such diverse communities?
Yeah, so it's a lot of listening. I've been a journalist for decades, and I've been honestly in the front lines of some of the most divisive and critical moments in our greater community. And that's even specifically in Minnesota, where I've been honored to be a journalist for more than a couple of decades. And so just being there and having my ears open and my eyes open to everyone's feelings, and not to mention being able to also discern what is so important in a given moment. So, having that kind of pragmatic, objective approach of what is resonating in this moment and how we can, in some cases, come together, and how we need to fight fiercely in other cases. I just think I have been able to develop, comes with age, but I've been able to develop the skill set of really being able to kind of collate the information and then deliver that profound message. That is unique to journalism. It is something that, as I've been able to teach journalism to future journalists, which has been a great honor, but it is a skill set that can translate to other careers too, but it is definitely compounded, and it's a gift that you uniquely gain, I'd say, in this particular field. And so when I've talked to DFL leaders over the years, I've always been immensely grateful for all of the leaders who have stepped up. I'm going to go ahead and say Senator Elise Mann was the perfect leader for our community, because I saw, and I think we all did, how during the pandemic, medical science was being distorted and there was all kinds of misinformation. And for her to stand up as an ER doctor and deliver the truth of the moment was beautiful. And I feel like I'm ready to take the baton from her as we continue to need to navigate this really challenging time, and also deliver those profound messages in a powerful way that makes it clear Minnesota's not going to accept what you're trying to give us.
Sure.
We've made that clear in other ways as well, obviously, but also just the chance to listen to all the people. Again, the expertise in our district alone is mind-boggling. It's wonderful.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the district itself. What do you kind of see as some of the top priorities for how to address what's happening in the district at the moment?
We're not that far from Annunciation Catholic School, for one. And I think we all felt that on that day. Anytime tragedy like that hits close to home, you can't help but reflect on what does this mean? What can we do differently going forward? And I actually was honored to moderate a panel with several Annunciation parents, some Parkland from Florida, parents as well, and Sheriff Witt and a few others participated, and it was a really meaningful conversation. I would argue that we do need to take those very strong steps forward still toward gun reform, and listening to people who have been so profoundly affected by gun violence would be the first step, I would say. But then being able to take other bites of the apple. I've talked to some of the gun reform real experts, if you will, in our state, and they say, Karla, don't get sold on just one policy, because I would say, storage, safe storage laws, or assault weapon ban, or high capacity magazine limits. All of those to me seem like obvious next steps to build on what the legislature did in 2023 when they got the red flag law enacted and when they expanded the background checks. Those could be our next steps. But she warned specifically, and I've read this elsewhere, that you need to be a little bit flexible to what the moment is going to provide you. And so maybe it might be another policy, but let's just keep taking those bites. So that would be one big issue. Education funding would be another. I think Three Rivers Park District, I've had the opportunity to talk to the park superintendent and a couple of the board commissioners, and I am amazed by their work. This is a jewel in Bloomington specifically, a little bit in Edina as well. And, looking to continue to support that in a meaningful way, and also at the state level, I think would be an excellent issue to revisit. And then again, I got to go back to democracy. And again, democracy being what it is, and we saw it in Bloomington as well, and even in Edina as well, all of this coming to our front doors and our world in terms of what this ICE enforcement means for our beloved neighbors, for our own family members. And so really continuing to focus on that communication and fighting for our rights, because we used to think that there was a bit of a differentiation, right, between state and federal. They have blurred that line, and we need to make sure that we're ready for the next onslaught, because there will be a next one.
Perfect. So you touched briefly on the budget, education. Tell me a bit about how you kind of envision what a good balance is for the budget, education, infrastructure. How do you kind of anticipate your approach to that balance would be?
I think we have to be mindful of the toll of inflation and how people feel about how wages haven't always matched what we're seeing in inflation. And so, adding taxes onto the middle to lower income statuses are not necessarily welcomed or even practical in this moment. There is a desire, though, I would argue, that we can, close some tax loopholes that apply to corporations, and I think that is definitely on the books. But I will also say that there are some additional strategies that we can employ in terms of making sure that we do some real careful analysis of where we can spend that money. And I have to say, teachers, they have to be given their pay. Inflation goes up, their pay should go up. The resources that they need to run their classrooms effectively, those are our future generations after all, that needs to go up as well. And I think, just being very mindful of it. I would love to say that we have an endless pot. That is not accurate. We know that to be true. But that all said, too, I do think it's important to acknowledge when we ask taxpayers to give their money, and we are grateful for that. I'm a taxpayer. I give my money. We also need to be very responsible and accountable for that. So I think even as DFLers and Democrats, we need to say, okay, there were some mistakes on our watch. We too recognize that that is not acceptable for anyone. We will be accountable. We will take action to do our due diligence. And furthermore, we'll do that not just because we owe that to taxpayers, but we also owe that to the very people who rely on some of these services to maintain their lives. Their very livelihoods in some cases, but their very lives in other cases. So to recognize that there is too much at stake, and the interruption of those services that is caused by any kind of investigation is not acceptable again. So for many reasons, I would want to do that.
And to go off topic for a second, you bring up an interesting point about how it's time for Democrats to kind of take the mantle of the fiscal conservatism. And I think now is a good time to kind of approach that, because right now Democrats do have that ability to kind of say, we are able to appropriately address the budget.
I think so, and I don't even know. And the reason I shook my head there was not to be, an oppositional or contrarian, but I don't know if I'm going to accept that label so much as just say I think it's fair for us to be accurate and transparent. And I think
to be clear, that was my wording.
Yeah,
I chose that statement.
Yeah, and I just want us to be honest, and I think that is a democratic principle, and it does match with our values. We're not the right party, but we are the right ethical party, and so I would like to uphold the honest collection of people's taxes that they work hard for, and we owe that to them. But yeah, I would say that that's as liberal a value as anything.
Okay, perfect. So that kind of ties into the next topic that I have is about the cost of living. So you mentioned this briefly about addressing things and making things easier for the consumer and the taxpayer. But give me a little bit more information about how you think that a state senator can help ease some of that burden.
I think it's partly the services that we offer, right? So childcare, stable housing, care partner services, and I'm, as I mentioned, an Alzheimer's daughter. That is a crisis that is only growing literally every day as we are an aging community, and the cost of care is astronomical, and also astronomical not just for the individual family, but again the greater community. And we just, our elders all deserve that. Our loved ones who are aging, ourselves as we age, we deserve that dignified quality care. So all of that said, those services, if we can bolster and supplement, subsidize those to some extent as needed, and as these crises ebb and flow, I think that is one part of the solution. I would also say that with respect to, and I think this applies to childcare as well, but certainly it definitely applies to care partner services, making sure that we have a wage that is competitive.
Sure.
When you are asking people to do the important service of caring for our loved ones or ourselves and still getting paid possibly less than what they could stocking shelves at Target or Amazon, that's a problem. That is a crisis again, that I think we need to kind of take stock, pun intended, because I was talking about stocking those shelves, but we need to take stock of where our priorities are, truly. And it harkens back, I did several stories during the pandemic about people being separated from their loved ones who were living in long-term care communities during the pandemic for everyone's safety and health, and how devastating that was for people. But I'll never forget Dr. Joe Gogler, who heads up the long-term care and aging department at the University of Minnesota, shared with me, he's like, maybe one silver lining of this pandemic, Karla, will be that our society recognizes that we need to invest more in the care for our aging elders, our aging adults. I would argue that we haven't had that epiphany yet. I think it would be great if we still did, because I think it is really important that we honor everyone who is aging and that we provide that care. But those are the kinds of services that, as people are struggling at any stage of life, it is their child care, if it is finding that stable housing, if it is then later in life trying to care for your loved one, your life partner, now you're a care partner to that person, whatever it is, we as a state can play a definitive role by recognizing the situation. And I'll just end with this now, because I know I'm belaboring this. But for each of those segments, they're an incredible group of committed career people, in healthcare capacity and childcare capacity, who I would want to shine their perspectives on this very issue and how to navigate and negotiate this in order to determine the best solution for going forward, because that's ultimately what it will take, is multiple voices, not just Karla's voice, because Karla, is passionate clearly about this issue, but I want to hear from everybody who's been working in those healthcare fields or those childcare fields or any of the others, stable housing, my friends at People Serving People. I'd want them at the table when we're talking about what more we can do, and I think there's a multi-housing equation as part of the solution too, but I know I'm jumping probably into another topic altogether.
We will get there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next topic that I want to talk about is something that we sort of briefly touched base on with the gun control, about public safety. Yeah. Tell me what you think the role of public safety is in a community.
It needs to be there. We do. We need our law enforcement, and I'm grateful to everyone who serves in a public safety role. I've had the pleasure and honor of interviewing folks for many years over the course of my journalism career, and they are incredible people who are called to public service as well. And so I think that as we also recognize the challenges of this moment and what has happened in terms of the conflicts and the outright crimes that we've seen committed at the hands, sadly, of law enforcement, we can also recognize the good people who have again committed their careers and their lives to this work. So when we look to go forward, I think it's kind of a hybrid approach. I mean, I love the idea of our police officers, for example, not responding by themselves to every crisis call, but having a mental health expert, having a social worker also part of that response team to help de-escalate the situation and help reach the person based on their formal training. It gives them an opportunity, it serves our community member who, again, might be in a crisis on their own, an opportunity to kind of de-escalate before there's any kind of confrontation. I would love to have that approach. That said, I would again say, and this is like what I mentioned, just a few days ago with that panel discussion of people who've experienced gun violence in the most horrifically personal way. I would want all of the people to be at the table as we discuss how to do this, because I think if we can engage in a respectful and open-minded way, we will be in the best possible position to find solutions finally, because that's what we all want. I think people are approaching it from different angles, but if we can really listen to each other, I think we can really figure out a good approach that would meet Minnesotans where we want to be, and that's safe. We want ourselves to be safe, our kids to be safe, everyone to be safe.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, and I want to talk about housing.
Yeah.
So we briefly also touched base on this, but I want to dive into some details about what you kind of conceive of the inventory of available housing, the cost of housing, and then how the state Senate can address some of those concerns.
I think the state Senate can be more aggressive. We can message it correctly, I think, but we could be more aggressive at encouraging multi-housing units. And I think that is really where our solution is. I think that if we can open our mind, we in Minnesota, we have such a wonderful quality of life, and so much of our ideal scenario is getting that, that one house for that one family unit, and then that is our American dream, and specifically even our Minnesotan dream. But I think we can grow into a different understanding of what that dream represents and what that dream looks like. And so I think having those multifamily units and allowing for those multi-housing units to exist in all of the spaces, and that might mean really persisting with some communities about this and about the advantages. And, I think loving our neighbors, and I think, Minnesotans have preached this. We are the best teachers right now about how we can show up with capacity to love and support our neighbors. And I think most of us would welcome and be open to what is sustainable for everyone to own their own home, and whatever that is defined as, but also what is sustainable for our greater community and in terms of our environment. And so there is a possible way to reach people and kind of redefine that dream and allow people to feel like they're still part of that conversation. But I think we can lead it. I do think at the state level, and particularly as we've been allowing communities to handle this on their own, we can play a part. We can have a strong voice in that conversation, and I frankly think we should.
Absolutely. So I have one more question, and then I want to give you the opportunity to, make your pitch. The last question I have, we mentioned news distortion briefly, and recently there's been some distortion about fraud in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about your perspective on transparency and accountability.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in it. Obviously, I think in this day and age, and when people are moving toward their echo chambers and they're only taking their news and they're only deciding what is fact based on their preferred source, that's problematic. And so it is why I would always insist on full communication, sometimes more words than you want to hear from me, whether it's in an email or a speech or whatever, but full communication with the promise that I will never speak that in a way that is knowingly untrue. I will be the first person to say, I don't know something, let me research it more before I answer in a way that is inaccurate. That's the journalist in me. I always, even though I have been a liberal my whole life, and my childhood friends can attest to this, I was always so insistent that none of my viewers or readers would ever know the political party to which I was aligned, because I wanted to be so balanced and so accurate that they would not be able to read that. And I found it to be a really high compliment that some of my viewers said, okay, I'm out of here because I didn't know that you were a Democrat, so see ya. And I'm like, well, if that's really how you're going to judge me, see ya. See you back. But ultimately, I just really think accountability and transparency is easy. It's possible. We have a world that has social media platforms everywhere we turn, and we can't escape it. But I also think that having that commitment to truth, having a commitment and an awareness of humility for when we aren't the foremost expert, but to say to your constituents or to the community, whoever is tuning in that particular moment, I'm going to get back to you on that. I'm going to do the due diligence. I'm going to talk to all of the experts in our community who are the persons who have committed their careers to this particular field of work. And I will get you an answer that is not just satisfying to you, but will help you feel better about the decision that may be before you or the choice you have to make in your life or whatever it is. I think I think accountability and transparency begins with truth.
All right.
And that is something I will never, ever compromise on.
That's great. And lastly, what's your message to undecided voters? Why should people vote for you?
So I would say thank you if you are considering voting for me. I just truly believe that this is a fraught moment, a challenging moment, and we have seen the best of Minnesotans in the last few months, and it is inspiring. And I will tell you, I have been deeply inspired by every single conversation with delegates. Thank you for the time that you've given me on the phone if you've been one of those delegates. And I can tell you and reassure everyone that we have an incredibly talented and committed community. And we can go forward with all of our passion and all of our policies and our values. And I believe that that is best represented in the DFL party. Why I uniquely can serve us in this moment is that I am so committed to listening to all of you and to really harnessing those passions and all of those information venues or whatever background that you might have. I want to tap into all of that, and I will message from that point forward in a way that is not just progressive, but also effective, that we can actually achieve that which so many of us agree on in terms of improving our quality of life and, of course, standing up for our democracy, and also making sure that we have a good world, a good community for our children and everyone's kids tomorrow. So there is a chance to message in this moment, and as a longtime communicator and as a journalist, I am ready to be that messenger for all of us.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Karla.
Thank
Good luck
you,
on the
Alex.
election.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate this again.
Yeah.